There you go. And you are you're essentially, sorry, let me make you a co-host.
Okay.
There you go. You can share whatever you wish. And, oh, sorry, so to begin this, I'm used to having a formal meeting of sorts. So I'm really excited to present and to talk with, from. Hi, welcome. And we're gonna, any questions anybody has in the Zoom audience, please either put them in the chat or like have a place where you can ask Amy what's going on. But I just want to introduce Amy Kaufman Phillips.
Hi.
Who is,
Hello, Amy.
with the Conservation Foundation, and she can tell you more about all of her background and whatnot, but I've been a super fan of her personally and her work for years, and just want to say that I think after hearing and listening and being educated about all the amazing things, not all, but a section of the amazing things that one can do in one's backyard, it was really helpful to, I think, spread that information. So Amy, I'm really looking forward to hearing more from the perspective of Lyle Township.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to check and see that the people on Zoom, if you have any trouble hearing me, please let me know. The owl is very, very close to me. Oh, it is. I am muted. Hold on. No, I'm supposed to be muted, right? Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
All right. So if anybody has any trouble hearing, please put it in the chat. We will definitely try to address that. The owl's right there. So you should be able to hear me okay, but just in case, just let us know. So I'm going to talk to the people here, but everyone can see me on this. So yeah, let me go ahead and start sharing my slides. I brought some slides. I have really pretty pictures of plants and different things that you can do. And, you know, some people say it's like walking a puppy up on stage. I'm just going to show you some really pretty pictures, and then you'll pay attention to pictures and probably not listen to me, which is totally fine. So everybody can see it okay? All right. And on Zoom, we're okay? All right. Please let Diane know if anybody has any trouble. But yeah, we can keep this as formal or as informal as you want. Again, my name is Amy Phillips. I'm with the Conservation Foundation. I've been with them for about 5 years. I've been doing youth programs for the last 4 years. And so this is, so now I get to talk about plants and native plants and rain barrels and all those fun things that people can do to build resilience and beauty and health into their backyards. And then by doing so can help improve the health and wellness of their communities at the same time. So really from the Conservation Foundation, I'll just kind of give you a little bit of information about me, about us. And then I want to talk about some of these, what we call nature solutions for climate action. Because I think a lot of times, and if you want to pass those flyers down, and Diane, I can give you the PDF of this and you can share it. But it's just really a PDF. It's kind of a one-pager for those on Zoom. It's a one-pager of some of the slides that I'm going to be sharing. And because I think a lot of times we think about landscape and gardening, we don't necessarily think that we think we're doing something to improve ourselves, and you know, it's something we enjoy and we're creating beauty. But at the same time, we don't always think about that larger picture. How does the plant selection that I use help to improve the health and wellness of my community? And so what we have a program called Conservation Home, and I'm going to talk about that throughout the presentation, but it's basically, you know, talking about different things that you can do, actions you can take in order to start to build that resilience into your yard. So I'll just give an introduction to myself, to the Conservation Foundation, and we'll spend most of our time talking about plants and other pretty things. Okay, so Conservation Foundation, we've been around for over 50 years. And we are a land trust. We started here in DuPage County. So DuPage County is my territory. It's the part that the part of our counties that I work with. And so I know a lot about DuPage County. I'm very excited, but we save land and we save rivers and we support healthy communities. Has anybody been to the Conservation Foundation McDonald Farm in South Naperville? You have? What brought you there?
So many years ago, I don't remember. So our parents were one of the first, I think they got a quarter share.
Okay.
When the farm just
When Steve started it, yeah. So you've been down there for the working organic farm that's down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my kids are a couple of years.
Oh, very cool. Have you guys been there before?
No.
Oh, okay. So do you know where the Knock Hills Nature Center is? Okay, so it's like 87. Oh, okay, yeah, no. And you're Lyle, you're not Naperville, so you're not obligated to know where all of our, oh, you are Naperville, okay. All right, yeah, so we're down in, it's basically like 87th Street, so it's right on the border of Will County. So actually the farm is in Will County. But if you take Washington South on, like, if you're in downtown Naperville and you take Washington South to about 87th, it's a little bit past that, but it's right around that area. Yeah, and we like to call it an oasis in the suburbs. It's actually 60 acres of 40 acres are in organic farm production. It started by Steve Tewald back in 20 years ago. It was called the Green Earth Institute when he decided he wanted to retire and not spend all of his time farming. We took over the operations of it, the Conservation Foundation did, and now it's called the Green Earth Harvest. So yeah, I think I'm gonna butcher the numbers, but I think we support 500 families each year with working with organic produce that's produced right there on the farm in Naperville. There's lots of colorful stories about how that came to be, but I'll focus on the native plants in your yards, and we can always go back to those other conversations if you'd like. But so again, we are a land trust. But we really want to focus on improving the health of our communities, because I'm going to talk about that over and over again, but that is really what we do. We are a land trust, so what that means is we basically buy, hold, take care of land and have stewardship for land. A lot of the protected areas, the forest preserves, the park districts that exist in DuPage County are a result of some of the work that people far before I ever got there were involved in. So we still continue to do that. A lot of DuPage is pretty built up at this point. So within DuPage County, we're really focusing on activating those spaces. How can we welcome more people into them? And how can we make them a welcoming environment that people can enjoy the mental and physical health benefits of being out in nature? But we also work in all the surrounding counties as well. You can see those little dots on those maps. That is all properties that we have played a part in conserving, either as owning it and managing it directly, or as something that we played a part in the transaction to make that happen. Over 36,000 acres have been preserved by the Conservation Foundation. So we talk a lot about green space and open space, but I really want to show you guys why this is so important, because if you look at this slide, this is in 1830. This is the amount of development that was in 1830, 1900, the red is development. You can start to see that Chicago starts to develop 1950, 2000. And those little patches of green are all the open space, very important. But you can see it's dramatically overwhelmed by the red. And then that is the projections for 2030. So if all of this area is development, you can see how important that little ring, those little splotches of green that are in there, you can see how important they are, because it really is about preserving quality of life. So the water, air quality, drinking water, preserves for wildlife, opportunities for people to get outdoors. And as somebody who spent a long amount of time in youth ed and has teenagers myself, there's a responsibility to future generations. What are the things that we can do now to leave the world a better place for them? One of the programs I'm not going to talk about in too much depth, but it's another program that I run within DuPage County, is called Nature RX. And so it's really about, again, activating the existing open spaces, getting people excited about going outside, finding out why people don't do it, and starting to try to address those barriers a little bit, so that people can have access to all of these amazing health benefits. I have two kids with ADHD myself. That's one of the things you'll see on here. And just having kids outdoors active is it's a way of engaging people into whatever you're trying to teach them. If they're doing it and they're active and they're involved in it, they access it a lot better. But everything from lessening fatigue, from exercise, so that the physical health benefits, improved vision. I mean, you can't read it from here, but I'm happy to share slides, Diane, if you'd like to pass them around. But this is one of those that it's just the amount of health and wellness benefits that people get from going into an outdoor space is it's been proven scientifically, and I think we also just know it qualitatively. You feel better after you've been outside. So with that in mind, I wanted to start talking a little bit more about plants, because that's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about what are the actions that we can take to start to build a healthier community. And Diane was talking to me about No Mow May, and I wanted to kind of showcase these two different lawns And I'm not sure if you can see that picture on the left very well, but could you tell me a little bit about what is different about those two photos? Can you see?
On the left, it looks like the grasses are a lot taller, probably 12 or 18 inches. high. And on the right, it's much closer to the ground.
Well, also, it looks like on the left, those just look like weeds. And on the right, it looks like the kind of things that the bees and butterflies would like.
Yes, and that's a very important distinction, what you just made. I mean, I'm not sure it's so much weeds as this is grass gone to seed, but grass gone to seed does not feed pollinators.
Mm.
Dandelions, the little ones you see in there, the dandelions, shoot, is it irises? I keep getting those little blue flowers mixed up, but the ones, when we're talking about no mow May, it's these flowers that we want to try to give access to. But grass gone to seed is not what the bees are looking for, right? And so my guess is what happened to the one on the left is they probably hadn't had a conversation. It's pesticides and herbicides, and I know it's pretty far away from you. But if you have lawn services, sure, yeah, I think the lights are actually over there. I don't know if it's gonna turn everything off, but that's the projector. I know that one's the projector. Okay, well. You can go sit up a little bit closer if you'd like to, but so I have a service that comes around, spreads some stuff on my lawn. You know, I don't have anybody mow because I have this much lawn, but I've had that conversation with them about what I want them to put on it and what I don't want them to put on it. Most of the time, I don't want to speak out of turn. I'm not sure what all lawn services do, but there's a lot of times the herbicides are always put on lawns because the herbicides are the ones that are going to kill the dandelions. They're going to kill anything that is not grass. And so if you have a lawn service that comes and sprinkles stuff on your lawn, it might be fertilizer, but it also might be an herbicide. And those herbicides, if you have a lawn and you treat it with herbicides, and then also if you treat it with pesticides, sometimes if you've got like grub control or mosquito control, those are pesticides. So if you have herbicides, you're not going to have the flowers for the bees to land on. If you have the pesticides, it's going to kill them when they do, right? So if you do no mow May, you need to make sure that you are not putting herbicides and pesticides on your lawn. Because if you are, it's not. But if you're not, then you can start to look at no mow May as what I like to call an entry point. I'm not sure if that's something that's in common parlance or not, but you know, we do things like container gardening, right? Container gardening is an entry point into learning how to garden, into learning how to grow food for yourself, realizing the health benefits of it in a very small contained way. And you're not going to have to like redo your whole yard to put in 20 raised beds when you want to just learn how to do it, right? And to me, no mow May is very similar to that. It is really about raising awareness of the biodiversity crisis that it does exist. The bee population and all insect populations are crashing. So understanding that that is a problem, having no mow May as an opportunity to raise awareness of that is very important. But the person that does environmental science that lives in the back of my head wants to put an asterisk and say, have you talked to your lawn service? What are you putting on your lawn? Because if you're adding these pesticides and herbicides, you're not actually doing anything. So what I want to talk about for the rest of the time is really about this holistic approach. I could talk for hours about grass, and you know, I have some grass. I'm not one of those that says you have to get rid of all your grass, because from an aesthetic point of view, having that kind of low growing green space is almost like the frame around the canvas, right? Like your flowers or your showy canvas, you want to have a lot of mulch beds and flower beds with native plants. I'll talk about why that's important. But having a little bit of grass to kind of show that off, not a bad thing, you know, but I have this much grass because I'll show you pictures. I have so many plants. Whoever buys my house is going to probably be like, okay, what was this person doing? Because literally if somebody's giving me a plant, I'm like a plant rescue. You know, people rescue dogs, I rescue plants. This is what I do. So, but if you look at this, you'll see that lawn is actually the largest crop in almost in 4/5 of our states, right? So we spend on average $500 a year per household for lawn services, irrigation, mowing, maintenance on our mower, gas for our mower, however you spell it, $40 billion a year in America alone. That there are consequences, there are challenges associated with that, right? So CO2 emissions, air pollution, noise pollution. If you're in Naperville, there's a group called the Naperville Environmental Sustainability Task Force. I was part of that. We wrote this report called Naperville 2036. And in that, this graphic that's there on this flyer came from that report. But it says 1 hour of lawnmower use is the equivalent of driving 300 miles. 1 hour. So that's what, here to St. Louis?
Yeah.
1 hour of leaf blower use is like driving 1,100 miles.
Oh my gosh.
Which is what, these are like LA to Denver, but that doesn't help me because that's out west and that's might as well be the moon. You know, like what is 1,100 miles from here? Tennessee? I have no idea. So yeah,
New York
but anyway,
City.
and if you've ever tried to sit out on your porch and have your coffee, or in my case, try to do work outside, when the lawnmowers and leaf blowers are going, you're gonna get irritated. So there's those consequences. It is very, very low biodiversity in a lawn. So we say it's biologically dead. It's kind of it's not actually dead, it is, but it doesn't support life, right? It doesn't support life. It is chemically dependent. So you're exposing yourself and your pets and your kids to these toxins. And if you've got any yard with flooding issues, which I know a lot of us do, it's just, it doesn't do anything to soak it up, right? Plus 30% of residential water usage goes toward irrigation. So lots of challenges, but again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have any lawn. This is my house when I bought it off on the left. This is my house on the right. So at first I had minimizing turf as an opportunity to add plants, but then I was like, well, not everybody loves plants. I love plants, but not everybody does, right? So it's an opportunity for conservation. It's an opportunity to really start to address this crisis of biodiversity. And there's this 30 by 30 global biodiversity framework, which in a nutshell is a global agreement that they're trying to push through that says that we are going to conserve 30% of our land and water by 2030. It's an ambitious goal. And especially when you realize that 95% at least of land in Illinois, and I'm going to extrapolate that to other regions, is privately owned. So we can't conserve 30% of the land mass in Illinois because it's owned by private property. So that's why I really want to start to think about your yard and where you live, your community. You know, this isn't just your yard. We're talking about yards, but this could be extrapolated out to wherever you work, wherever you do business, wherever you have an organization that owns property. I mean, there's a lot of, think about any privately held land that you are associated with, and think about it as an opportunity to address the biodiversity crisis. All the little green dots are places that we have certified conservation home properties. And the stars are the different municipalities within DuPage County that we have an agreement called Conservation and Community. It means that we sort of help each other figure out how to help the residents. Glen Ellen has a very good system that they will pay for there's a registration fee for this conservation home program. I'll talk about it. It's like $50 or something. And Glen Ellen will actually pay for that for the first X amount of residents. So we get all these calls from Glen Ellen because the municipality itself is incentivizing it. It's very cool. So again, grass has its uses. This is my kid playing soccer. It'd be really hard to play soccer in a prairie, right? But the memories that we make are not necessarily on grass. They're, you know, in the ponds, in the fields, on play equipment with their friends. These are the things, rethink your lawn, rethink how you are taking care of it and how you're spending your money. And then what can you do with it? So that's what we want to spend the rest of our time on, is talking about these nature solutions for climate action. You have the flyer in front of you because I know this might be a little bit hard to read up there. But that'll have some details. There's so many more details on our website. So please, and my cards are here. So if you have any questions, just ask, let's talk. But this is another one of those like either or scenarios, right? So like on the left, you see grass and trees, right? And on the right, you see. What do you see? You tell me, what do you, what do you see the difference between the two on the left and the right?
Colorful flowers on the right. And don't see any grass.
There are some grasses, they're just built, it's a little bit further away, but some of the tufts that you see, those are actually grasses, but they are more, they're native prairie grasses as opposed to Kentucky bluegrass that's on the left.
And I suppose the rock fences, or whatever you would call them, assist in preventing erosion of the hillside. And then the plantings in between also help that.
Yes, and we'll talk about how they do. Yeah, so these are opportunities, right? These are not things that people are forcing down your throat, but these are opportunities. And so what we try to do with the Conservation Foundation and our Conservation Home Program is help make these opportunities accessible and easy so that it's not quite so daunting. So I'm not sure how many of you are well versed in landscaping plants. The ones on the left are all landscaping plants that everybody has in their yard for the most part. I have still some of them that I inherited from when I got it. The ones on the right, they actually have a name, but everybody just calls them ditch lilies. And I don't know if you've ever seen these plants before, but like once you have them, you can't get rid of them because they're invasive. They will take over. I have a neighbor on one side and like they keep coming up the side and I think he's even trying to pull them on his side because they were just with the house. But like you're constantly just pulling these ditch lilies. But it's probably got to have a better name, but you know, everybody just refers to them as ditch lilies. But these are a lot of different plants that are sold in stores. The landscapers love them because they know what they're going to do. And what we're going to show you are some alternatives to that. And I'm speaking specifically about native plants. And it's an important distinction to make because it is really about plants that have evolved here over time along with the wildlife. So you can have these beautiful plants that we just showed from Japan and Europe, and they come over here, but the wildlife hasn't necessarily learned how to use it. So by planting native plants, you're basically inviting wildlife to your yard. So if you like to look at birds, or if you like to, see the butterflies flying around, by planting these native plants, they know what that is. When I talk to kids, I always use the example of you go to an all-you-can-eat buffet, and you don't know what anything is, but there's mac and cheese. What are you going to choose? Right? They're going to choose the mac and cheese. And so that's what these animals and the animals and the flora and the fauna that have evolved over time, have evolved with these plants. They know that it's not going to make them sick. They're going to eat it. Now, in times of strife, I don't know how many of you guys have like 1 billion bunnies in your yard right now.
We had some last year.
Oh my goodness.
Lots of them.
I have like a
Make the
condominium
hostas.
of bunnies in my yard. They're even eating my milkweed. Milkweed is toxic to everything except the monarch butterfly, and they're eating it.
Oh,
So yes, they are probably struggling. So I always go on these tangents about what's going on in my yard because I could talk for hours about it. But anyway, so really what we're talking about doing is trying to increase that biodiversity, right? We want to improve the health of our communities. And one of the ways that we can do that is by increasing biodiversity. So these 5 sets of plants, and you can, again, I can send these slides, so don't worry about all that stuff. But these 5 families support 75% of the insect life. So oak trees, goldenrod, milkweed, asters, and black-eyed Susans, just those 5. Oak trees alone. So if everybody's planting maples in the streets and all of that, I have a maple, they're fine, but oak trees are a keystone species. Like they will support hundreds of different species of animal, all just in their branches. And obviously things that fly around. Okay, so here's why I talked about how they've evolved with the animals so that it will know how to eat them, right? It's also the other reason why native plants are so resilient is because of their root system. So on the left, you see hydrangeas, daylilies, and fountain grass, and then of course Kentucky bluegrass. I don't know, because of the Zoom thing, I don't know if we want to do this, but I can use this very quickly just to sort of illustrate. So let me think about this for a little bit because I'm not sure what to do about the owl in this guy. I have a root box, and this is one of the examples that I use with kids. And Let's see if I pull this up there, will the sort of, I don't know. I'm not sure it's gonna work with the Zoom scenario, but we can just do it really quickly. The rope itself represents how deep the roots are. So this is lawn grass. It's like 2 feet or 2 inches, sorry. Take this one and pull it. Yeah, so each one of those black dots is a foot. So it's
What
about,
is that?
that is coneflower. That is the coneflower that you see everywhere. It's a nice, easy one. All right, now, and so, and then we'll do this one. This is one that, it's a prairie plant. I love this plant. I'm not sure I would plant it. It wouldn't put in my front yard,
Oh.
but it's a good illustration of how deep these roots are.
Wow.
So folks on Zoom,
Well.
they're 14 feet deep. So having those
What is
really,
that one?
this one is compass plant. And again, it's not necessarily a landscape. If you've got a lot of space and you've got an area like off in the back, you could put compass plant. It's very tall. It loves to spread. So it's not one of those that is going to be in my book there because, most of us don't have acres and acres to plant, prairie plants. I love compass plant. It's got so many different stories. The plant itself is only about a couple feet tall, but then it sends up these sunflowers that are 10 feet up in the air. It's called compass plant because the leaves grow vertically and they're said to orient themselves north and south. With an asterisk, lots of stories aren't necessarily always true, but what is true, when you touch their leaves, it can be 95 degrees outside and you touch their leaves and they're cool. Why? 14 feet deep roots. That's how plants breathe, and they're taking that water from deep, deep below and bringing it up. So those deep roots, first of all, what's nice about that is you plant them, you got to take care of them, just like you got to take care of your babies when they're young. You got to water them, take care of them, baby in the first year. But then really after that, they kind of take care of themselves because those roots get established and they start to not only be able to draw from water below, but they're also breaking up that clay. A lot of us have very heavy clay soil. So they're breaking that up and they're creating these little channels, which allow when the rain does come. That's why grass, when rain comes on the grass, there's no roots to absorb it. It's just going to hit the clay, it's going to run off. But these roots, they're going to break up that clay. They're going to go super deep into the ground and they create these channels that then the water can percolate down in. So not only are they gathering water, it's not like there's aquifers down there that they're gathering water from. What they're doing is they're creating a sponge, and that sponge allows for that water to be held on site. Lots and lots of words on that one. Just really gets to the point that there's a lot of, they solve the problem. So I talked about water, that this is one way that some of these prairie plants will start to solve a problem. If you've got a wet spot, we can talk about that. If you've got very, very dry spots, like my parkway is just hard pan at this point. So having the little plants that I have a little tiny, well, it's not tiny, it's probably 10 by 10 spot of prairie plants that are in that parkway. And then that's going to be absorbing all of that. But I don't want to water over there. That's another thing that I do. I've got this one corner. I can't get a hose over there. So I just plant the prairie plants and I brought some buckets the first year and they're doing okay. The bunnies are getting them. That's a whole other issue. You should see all the fencing. I got bunny fencing like galore. Yes, so using water effectively and also feeding the butterflies. So there's a lot of different problems that these can solve. So I'm going to go through some here's the pretty picture part of the presentation. Talk about different plants that'll work in soil, different kinds of soil, wet and dry, different kinds of sun, shade, full sun, part sun. Also talk about kind of these more design ideas of making sure that you plant things that have different bloom times. So you want the prairie smoke to come right up in the beginning, and you want those kind of like I've got foxglove beard tongue, and that's blooming right now. And then soon, if bunnies don't eat it all, the black-eyed Susans are going to start coming up and the echinacea is going to start blooming. And then you get your asters into the fall. So having those different timing and sequences, really thinking through what do I want this to look like in the spring and the summer and the fall, and making sure you've got something that's blooming all the time because it looks nice. We'll talk about aesthetics, color, height, spacing. I'm not going to go super deep into this, but if you have specific questions, I'm happy to share some of that. So again, these are some of the flyers are up there, and again, I'm happy to share slides, but these are actually, I have all of these except Little Blue Stem, and I should probably go buy some. In my parkway, I have all of these plants, and the prairie smoke, there's one section that gets, when I run sprinklers for the tree, the prairie smoke really, really wants it dry. If you have any sprinklers at all, like it's not going to be happy there. Butterfly milkweed is gorgeous this year. It's sometimes, like it's always beautiful, but for whatever reason, maybe because it's been so dry, my butterfly milkweed has gone bananas. Prairie dropseed is a beautiful grass. It's just clumping. You can see in that photo. It stays put, it doesn't spread, it stays where you plant it. It has this beautiful kind of fountain aesthetic. And then in the fall, it sends up these tiny little flowers. They're just grass flowers, but some people say they smell like buttered popcorn. I don't always get that, but I have smelled it at times. But it's just a nice landscaping plant. If you just want something, you don't want to take any chances, and you don't want to risk something that's going to take off and all of a sudden start popping up in different places. Prairie dropseed's a great one. Black-eyed Susan is a bit of a spreader. I have that one, and the bunnies are eating it now, but before the bunnies started getting it, it's a bit of a spreader, but it doesn't like pop over and start going in the next yard, right? It just kind of overall starts to spread. And if you don't want it to keep spreading because it's crowding out some of your other plants, you just kind of pull it. Or what I do is I actually dig them up and plant them in other places. Wet soil. Do anybody have flooding in your yards? Are you more dry?
Dry clay.
Yeah, I got dry clay too. How about you guys?
Yeah, mine's house kind of like a slope, and so.
Okay.
It's a
So
little
it's
bit
probably-
higher than the neighbors, so I think it's a little drier.
It's a little drier. Yeah, same for you.
Slope too.
Here's a slope. Yeah. I'm a little bit on the higher end too within my neighborhood. Although I know when they built my house, they put a whole bunch of catch basins. So at some point it must have been flooding. We don't have that issue now. So I don't have a lot of these plants just because I don't have a wet spot in my yard. But there is something called a rain garden, which I can talk about if you would like to go there. But if you guys, I don't know if you lived in planned communities or not, but this is one of those things that I always want to put into a slide because I want to raise awareness, because when people are walking around and there's a lake and people are like, look at all this goose poop, I'm tired of stepping on it. Well, the reason is because you've created prime geese habitat. Like by having grass that goes straight to water, the geese have never been happier. You've basically created a paradise oasis for geese because they don't have to worry about predators. So when you create these more naturalized landscapes along a water's edge, I think this is actually at Atwater. Oh, that's interesting. You create these more naturalized landscapes along a water's edge. First of all, it's going to catch some of that nitrogen. It's going to catch some of those salts that you put on your sidewalks. It's going to catch some of those pollutants before it gets into the water. So it improves the water quality, but it also deters geese because the geese don't know what's in the tall grass. And they're going to back up and say, you know what, this isn't happy for me. I'm going to go somewhere else. So if you have a situation where, and we deal with this a lot with HOAs, if you have a situation where you're having erosion, you're having geese problems, having these more naturalized landscapes along the side are a really great way to address that. Rain gardens, I won't go in too much with this because everybody has dry land like me. We'll talk about dry plants, but these are another solution. So a lot of times, especially in unincorporated areas, you'll see those the ditches along the side of the roads. That's where they're swales. It's where all of the water from the road runs off. It's where the water from the houses run off, and it just sort of sits there. Usually, sometimes it'll grow cattails or things like that. But if you have a water spot in your yard, so as part of the Conservation Home Program, what we do is we will go out to people's yards and we will talk to them about the challenges they're having. And we will provide suggestions, and then you have the opportunity to join the Conservation Home Club, and you can learn from other people at the same time. So it's a great supportive network. Not only do you get expertise of either myself or one of my colleagues, but you'll also get the chance to learn from other people that are going through the program or have gone through the program and just love to talk about what they've done. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do rain gardens. That's one of the calls we get a lot is for people that have flooding in their yard and they want to figure out how to address it. Full sun, do you guys have full sun or shade or both or mix? Partial, okay. So these are all plants that really love to be in the sun. So again, my butterfly milkweed is going crazy. My blazing star got eaten by the bunnies. I'm hoping it comes back. All of these plants, purple cone flowers, that's another one that it's not a super spreader. It can spread. But, and when I say spread, I'm talking about just kind of taking over a little bit more territory every year. I'm not talking about jumping over the fence and growing somewhere else. But all of these plants are really going to want that big full sun. You know, full sun is defined as 6+ hours. So really, I mean, I wouldn't put this up against my house because my house is, there's not going to be enough sun that way. But, you know, I've got this, it's still in my front yard. I've north facing yard. They're probably 15 feet away from the house and it's still enough. And there's trees and they still get enough sun. They're very happy. But I also have a lot of shade. I don't know if you guys have big trees. I got a Norway maple. I can't grow anything under. And if anybody has any suggestions on that, I'd love to hear it. But I do have some parkway trees that are elms. And then I've got, of course, my house itself, which provides a lot of shade for part of the day. So the wild ginger is more of a ground cover. It's a nice ground cover. Like you plant it and it will sort of start to spread, which is actually a good thing because you want your ground covers to spread. Wild geranium just pops up, looks beautiful in the spring, and then just sort of falls away. And so the way that I have it is combined with ferns. So ferns are another species that can take some shade. So I have the wild geraniums and the bluebells and the phlox that comes up and just provides that kind of burst of beautiful color in the spring. And then they sort of just fade back. But when I say fade back, I mean, it's, you know how like tulips will kind of turn brown and just sort of fall over. That's kind of what they're called spring ephemerals. That's sort of what they do. But the leaves will still, in these, the leaves will still stay, but you really want something else to sort of pop up and show after that. And so in my shade planter that I have the ferns that come up and are showy after that.
So do you cut the geranium?
I don't need to because my ferns are so big. No, you can't see anything once that happens. But the wild geranium, the leaves will stay. Bluebells are true spring ephemerals in the sense that they are just gorgeous. And then they're like a tulip. They, you know, the leaves just dry and fall off. But then they come back the next year. This happens to me every year. I've had bluebells for 3 years and every year I'm like, oh, right, I planted those there. I do this all the time. Wild columbine, I also had that one. That one is definitely a reseeder. So, but it's got the little leaves look like almost like big clovers. They're really kind of interesting. And it's just a little clump. It's not very big, but then it sends up these kind of 2 foot, 3 foot tall stalks with these little red flowers in the spring. This is also spring. One of the things when we talk about nature's solutions, I'm talking way too long, but one of the things we talk about with nature's solutions, we're really talking about like understanding why it grows where it grows. So a lot of these spring ephemerals grew up under oaks, and oaks don't leaf out until June, late May. So as long as they grow early, set flower, seed, and then let their seeds go, they're done. They go back to sleep, right? So a lot of the flowers that we see in shade gardens are flowers and in native settings are flowers that they're in the spring. So they call it spring ephemerals. But what's nice about the columbine is the leaves will stay. And then what I do is I cut off the stalks and the flower heads and the seed heads, and I go put them on another side where I want them to grow because they will. So as long as there's some of them you kind of have to just know like, columbine's gonna want to, it's gonna want to reseed itself. So as long as if you want it to reseed itself, great. You never have to plant that plant again, but it will come back every year. Oh my goodness. All right, I'm gonna have to talk a little bit faster. All right, so bloom time, that was the one, and we've already kind of gone over there, but you know, the same landscape can look very different in different times of year, especially when you get into September and asters, like the purple aster starts blooming, and there's just fields of purple, and it's really, really beautiful. And then of course, height. So if you join the Conservation Home Program, there's a lot of guidance and I have a brochure I can show you here, but you know, you don't want to plant the compass plant right by your house, right? Because it's just going to be too tall. It's going to block your driveway. You know, it's just, it's not a landscaping plant. Same for big blue stem, but some of these you could plant, you know, a little bit further away. Some of them you could, like butterfly milkweed, you could plant that anywhere. It's a very stable plant in the sense that it's just it's gonna go where you started it. It might come up a little bit, but it's not like aggressive reseeder or anything like that. And then what's really amazing about milkweed, all right, actually, does anybody know what's amazing about milkweed? Tell me,
Monarch butterflies,
what is it for them?
it's for their main,
It's the only thing.
It's
that
the
larvae
only
will
host
eat.
plant. It is the only house plant or host plant. There are a number of different kinds of milkweed. There's common milkweed, which I planted in my front yard and I don't recommend. Smells amazing, super aggressive.
Hmm.
Backyard plant. I love it. Actually, I love it. I would put it everywhere, not in my front yard. That was a mistake. But I also have butterfly milkweed in my front yard, and it's just this beautiful orange little bush of plants. And it is also that host plant for the monarch butterflies. And what's great, when you plant these, all of a sudden, all the monarchs are flying across my driveway because they're on either side. So I've got one kind of milkweed on one side of my driveway and the other kind of milkweed on the other side, and the butterflies are constantly going back and forth. So it's really kind of cool. All the way to sedges and prairie smoke, which are very, very short plants. So, you know, kind of knowing that there's different zones, and I can pass this around. This is something that we offer when you go to the program, but there's, let's see if I can do this so the people on Zoom can see, but there's a image of, these are the different kinds of zones. And then within those zones, these are the different kinds of plants, and I can just pass this around, but the different plants that are recommended for more in the back of your yard, more in the front of your yard. There, I can pass that over there. So, yeah, and then so also just these ideas, you know, design ideas. If you're gonna plant all these plants, you want people to be able to be invited into it. So having a field, but you can't, there's no pathway to get through it. That's one of those things. You can do that with grass, you can do it with gravel, crushed granite. There's a lot of different, or mulch chips, you know, lots of different ways, but you want to sort of invite people in so that they can be encouraged to experience the plants and the benefits of it. Oh, that's weird. Okay. And then just sort of like just understanding what the plant is going to do. And that's why something like the Conservation at Home program is important, because you can ask advice of people. You can ask us as the staff members, but also there's a Facebook group, and you can ask all sorts of stuff on that Facebook group. And so there's certain plants that you know are going to be spreaders. So like the wild ginger, it's a ground cover. That's all it is. You want it to spread, right? But certain plants you may not want to spread. So you want to kind of understand what the plant is going to do. And then there's the ones that are the more clumpy, and those are really nice just because you know where you put them, they're going to stay put and they're not going to kind of take over. So the prairie dropseed that I talked about, the blazing star that's on the right, this butterfly milkweed, all of those are really good options for that. And some of these, like, and I've talked about a couple of these already, but these are plants that, you know, there's hybrid coreopsis that came with my house, and then there's like the native coreopsis too. But all of these different plants are just really beautiful landscaping plants that happen to be native and attract your butterflies and your birds. And then there's a whole bunch of other things. We talked about host plants and how the milkweed is a host plant for the monarch butterfly. But there's things, if you wanted to create a butterfly garden, we've been talking about more pollinator gardens, but if you wanted to create a butterfly garden, there's additional things you can do, like having little water, like it's called a puddler. That thing on the right is called a puddler. And it's really just places that are going to catch the rainwater. If we had rainwater, it would catch the rainwater. You can fill it with your own, I guess. But then also just have places for the butterfly or the bees. They both need to drink water, but they can't like go into the water because they'll drown. So having rocks that they can sit on to get to the water. Those dark rocks are really important for catching the sun. They can kind of regulate their temperature. Obviously, having the right kind of plants that are going to attract them. So just anytime you're trying to attract an animal, think about what's it going to eat, where's it going to get its water, and how is it going to protect itself from the rain. All of these are the different monarchs or the different milkweeds that I was talking about. The one on the bottom right is the butterfly milkweed. The one on the top top right is swamp milkweed, which you would think was for wet areas, but it actually is pretty tolerant of different soil conditions. So that part is nice. And the one in the middle is common milkweed, which I love. But again, it's very tall and it likes to spread. Native bees. So that, we talk a lot about butterflies, but a lot of people are scared of bees, right? And for good reason. They've been stung before. It's not fun. But usually when you are stung by a bee, it is because you got too close to its nest or you stepped on it, right? Like they're not going to actually come after you quite so much. That's not necessarily true for yellow jackets, right? So when we talk about bees and wasps, a lot of times those get mixed up in people's heads and they can't tell the difference. The left is a honeybee, not native, but we won't go into that. But there's hundreds of species of native bees too. Those native bees want nothing to do with us. We're just in their way to getting their flower. If we get too close to their nest, they're going to get upset. If we step on them, they will get upset. But the thing to remember about bees is they sting you, they die. So they don't want to do that. That's not true for wasps. But the thing to understand about yellow jackets and different kinds of wasps is they will pollinate, but they're not what we're attracting when we do the pollination. They are actually more carnivores. They want to go after the sweet soda or the sticky gum that was left somewhere or the meat that you left out because they're carnivores. They want to go after, they're going after aphids and the different insects that are growing on the plants. They're not actually going after the plants for the nectar. So when we talk about, attracting bees and butterflies, we're talking about those big bumblebees that if you go up to them, you can pet them on their back, like they're docile creatures. And they're just there to kind of go from flower to flower and pollinate your plants and then do what they're going to do with it. So that's more of a PSA for native bees are good. Yay. We want to plant these that attract them. Let's not worry quite so much about the wasps. As long as you're not leaving raw meat or sodas out, you're probably gonna be all right. And then of course there's my husband's a birder. We have no less than 6 bird feeders in our backyard. So, and he actually doesn't even care that they're mostly sparrows because he just loves them. He loves it. Yeah.
How do you prevent birds from hitting your windows?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do that. To think about it. Depends on what kind of windows you have. Sometimes what they're doing, sometimes people have very clear glass and they put plants behind it and they don't see the glass. So what they're doing is trying to fly through the glass to get to the plant behind it. So what you could do if you have that situation is move your plants so they're not in front of the windows. A lot of times in a residential, it's more of a reflection thing. So they think it's a mirror, but they don't see the mirror. So they just think they're flying into more of the same. I actually don't have any, I've, again, 5 bird feeders in my backyard. They do not fly into my windows at all. Where I've had bird losses is in my front yard. My son has a basketball hoop that's clear glass, and we used to have a tree right behind it. And that was where we had all the trouble. So the things you can do, there's a bunch of decals that they sell. You want to make something to make it visible. So if it's putting stickers on things or decals on things, anything that you can do to make that visible is helpful for those birds. And a lot of times, especially in a residential setting, they're not necessarily flying at full bore. So sometimes they can fall and they get sort of dazed and then they pick themselves up and they go. It's really a problem for skyscrapers, and especially in migratory bird season. So there's a lot of things that cities are doing, like the city of Chicago has things for, you have to turn off all the lights during migration season so they don't fly into the glass windows of those skyscrapers. But yeah, there is actually a very expensive glass called Ornolux bird glass. I don't think it's sold for residential, but it's Ornolux. It has got a 3D, and not 3D, it's got a low E coating on the outside, or no, it's on the inside that has a pattern to it. So birds can see ultraviolet, we cannot. So when we look at this glass, it looks very clear. But when the birds look at it, it looks opaque with these like different pattern to it. It looks like a spider web. And so then the bird won't fly into it. Yeah, I don't think it's sold for residential yet, but it's they use it for like animal enclosures and zoos. They use it. I know if it's ever been used in a skyscraper, but it needs to be. But yeah, anything to make the invisible visible is a good way of thinking that through. Yeah, and again, I talked about biodiversity as a resilient strategy, and it 100% is. And by attracting some of these animals to that, it's also a form of pest control, right? Like we think that the only way to do pest control is to throw a bunch of chemicals on something, but there's actually a lot of different options. I have chickens. People can get chickens. I'm sure I have grubs, but every time I see something, I just pick it up and I give it straight to the chickens, and that's protein for them. And then I get eggs. It's a beautiful relationship. Some of this stuff is really more about when you're growing edible foods like crop rotations, not necessarily relevant specifically to native plants, but figuring out how to, like, for example, the physical barriers. This is what I do with the bunnies. I just have bunny fencing up, basically. Or anytime I have a new plant, it's going to get a bunny fencing for at least 2 years. That's just the way it is. And then once it gets a little bit more established, it's going to be okay. But I have 2 new elderberry bushes that I put in last year. I still have the bunny fence up. I don't even know if they like elderberry, but I'm not going to take a chance. Because I bought 3 New Jersey tea shrubs and they just got destroyed. I had a brand new, how like you go Earth Day and people hand out little tiny trees, like here's a little oak tree, and it had these cute little beautiful leaves, and then the next day they were gone.
So are chickens allowed in the city limits?
In Naperville, yes.
In
I don't know
Naperville,
about Lyle.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Well, actually, let me rewind that.
We're in
Yes,
You're in Naperville, yeah.
where you live. Where you are. But in the.
Yeah, you can have up to 8 females. They don't want roosters. And then there's regulations for where they can be and how close to, lived in space and stuff like that. It's all on the city's
Wow.
website.
Township must a lot of roosters, because where my mom's house is, there's several.
Yeah, unincorporated is a
Five
different,
roosters.
yeah, unincorporated is different. But I'm talking about the city of Naperville limits. But yeah, there is a poultry ordinance.
It's fairly new.
I've had chickens for 8 years, and I think the ordinance has been around about 10.
The county is for the unincorporated, yes, especially, and in certain municipalities, it's been a huge controversy.
Glen Ellen is trying to do it now, and they have a group called Hen Ellen. I love Glen Ellen. I think they're amazing. Great. Anyway, so and alternatives to herbicides, because remember we started off with no mow May, and we were like, you can do that as long as you don't put herbicides and pesticides on, right? So different things that you can do. I actually did this cardboard thing. There's a really great it's like you make lasagna out of cardboard and dried leaves in the fall. And then, so I put cardboard down as a weed barrier. I put like a foot of dried leaves, and I put more cardboard, and you put more leaves. And then I actually ended up putting some fencing around it so it didn't blow everywhere. And then by the spring, it all sort of melted down. And so the cardboard acts as a weed barrier, but it breaks down and it biodegrades. So you can use that as a way to kill the grass around it. I was doing this because I was planting a new tree, and I wanted to make sure that the soil around the tree was super healthy. Again, we've got a lot of clay. and especially when you have a house that's been under construction. Mine wasn't, but it was a fairly new house when I bought it. And, there's a lot of gravel, there's a lot of clay, it's kind of a lot of junk. So whatever you can do to sort of build the health of that soil is a great way of doing it. And cardboard with your fall leaves is a great way of doing that. But you can use any kind of like straw, wood chips, all of that sort of works as well. Living ground cover, clover. I actually just learned today that if you have a lawn service that does fertilizers, it actually kills the clover. Which doesn't make any sense, but it does. And so I have to talk to my lawn service about that. Proper spacing, trying not to have bare soil. Those are the kind of things that you just want to try to prevent the weeds from coming up and then pulling them. Different ways to take care of the grass that you do have. Clover, again, I have to figure out what's going on with that one, but mulch clippings, soil testing, aerating the compacted soil. A lot of times if you've got an area that looks like, especially right now, it's so dry, the clay is just cracked everywhere. usually if you've got clay on the surface like that, first of all, it means you have some erosion issues. So you have to probably try to figure out where the water is coming from, and then it's basically going through that, eroding your topsoil and leaving. But one of the things you can do if you wanted to plant, say, some plants there, is just make sure you put a layer of compost down, because what you're going to try to do is give that plant some nutrients to work with. Get that compost on top of there. You could even use compost and reseed over top of grass if you've got the erosion issue under control. Fertilizing in the fall, spot treating, not broadcasting, herbicides. There are some, we love organic, we love all that stuff, but there's some invasive weeds like thistle that as soon as you pull it, it like sprouts two heads, right? It's just a very, very aggressive plant that's hard to get rid of once it's established. So do you know what thistle looks like? It's that really spiny, painful plant. You have to get like at the very bottom to pull it up. That is actually a really good use of spot treating herbicide, because that is really the only way to get it down to the roots, to kill the roots on a plant like that. And the most important thing is just never let it go to seed. If you have it in your yard, find it before it goes to seed. So I talked so long about plants and I'm already at time, so I'm going to kind of go through the rest of this, but I wanted to talk about how this was holistic, right? This is about minimizing the amount of turf grass that you have, inviting these native plants to your yard, and also figuring out the water, right? So having things like rain barrels, you want to try to hold as much water on the site as you possibly can. These are rain barrels. I've got the brochures there. They're actually that we sell them not only at the McDonald farm, but also in the spring. There's a number of different municipalities that have rain barrel sales, but they're pretty inexpensive. They're like $70 if you pick them up. Delivery is very expensive, so do not get it delivered to your house. But these are actually upcycled olive oil barrels. So it's really kind of cool. Composting, that's another thing that you can do. I talked about off on the left, you see the cracked soil, adding some compost on top of that area, figuring out the erosion issues that's causing that. But if it's not erosion and it's just that this area hasn't gotten water in a really long time, having some compost and giving it some water will help to sort of breathe some life into that. Chickens are also a very good compost. I give them my food scraps, they give me protein. It's a beautiful relationship. There's lots of different ways, and we talked a little bit about design, but there's a lot of different ways. You can have this native but neat, very manicured looking garden, or you could have just the total wild and free garden, and both are absolutely acceptable ways of doing it. So yeah, and that's part of the conservation home program, which I've talked about throughout. So the way that works is if you are interested in having somebody, either me or one of my colleagues, come out to your yard and talk about what are some of the options you could have. You could say, these are the challenges, this is what we're thinking. We bring our beautiful little binders there. You kind of talk about what you're looking for. And yeah, and then there's the club that you can join. It's inexpensive, and it's just a way of learning from other people as you're doing it. And then at the same time, at the end, you get that beautiful little sign to put in your yard. And these are some of Nature's Solutions. And then the last thing you do after you get your conservation home certified yard is you enjoy it, right? Have you heard the word biophilia before? Biophilia?
No, but I can, yes.
Bio meaning life, philia meaning love. So it's our innate love of nature. It's our innate love of the outdoors and watching all these animals. So when you invite nature to your yard, you get that calming and love of nature experience. And so the important thing is you put all this work in, you want to make sure you have a chance to enjoy it. So this is me, and look at that, right on time. You can answer. I'm happy to answer any questions. I was actually supposed to end at least 10 minutes ago, so we'd have time for questions. But you got me talking about my yard and my chickens, and I can't stop.